Today's World Insight, our exclusive with Chinese ambassador to the U.S., Cui Tiankai. Are we closing in on a New Year's trade resolution?
Of course, we always have problems and issues. So I think that the best way to celebrate is to confront the challenges and build an even stronger and longer-lasting relationship.
And with 2019 coming to a close, what has China gone through over the year? How does the world perceive China now, and how can China better communicate with the rest of the world? And here is our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight on CGTN. I'm Tian Wei in Beijing. This year saw the trade war between China and the United States escalate, with tariffs rising and officials shuttling back and forth between Washington and Beijing. Then, right at the end of the year, the two countries agreed to a Phase 1 deal. How trade tensions between the two world's largest economies shaping 2019, and what can we expect from the upcoming year of 2020? Before our exclusive with Cui Tiankai, the Chinese ambassador to the United States, take a look at this first.
It's perhaps the biggest news from the trade war this year. A first-phase trade deal clinched between China and the United States.
It's a Phase 1 deal, but a lot of big things are covered.
The agreement will help improve the cooperation between China and the U.S. in economy and trade.
U.S. negotiators say China has agreed to buy more American products, particularly agricultural goods, in a bid to reduce the trade deficit between the two nations. In return, the U.S. will cut existing tariffs on Chinese goods and cancel a new round of tariffs set to take effect on December 15th. For nearly 18 months, the world's two largest economies have been locked in a bitter trade battle. The tensions between the two countries are not only on the trade issue. The United States passed the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act this year and doubled down with a similar bill on another Chinese territory, its western region of Xinjiang.
Any attempt to interfere in China's internal affairs and block China's developments will eventually be abandoned by the rolling wheel of history.
Amid the 40th anniversary of China-U.S. diplomatic ties, both sides face the pivotal moment to reflect upon the historic date and to join hands to create a better future.
And I'm joined by Cui Tiankai, the Chinese ambassador to the United States. Ambassador Cui, welcome to CGTN.
Hello, Tian Wei. It's so nice to talk to you again.
What a pleasure to see you, sir. First of all, 2019, 40th anniversary of China-U.S. relations, and yet this year we've seen a bumpy ride, not necessarily a collective celebration. What do you make of the past year?
Well, as you said, the year 2019 marks the 40th anniversary of diplomatic relations between China and the United States. And over the past 4 decades, we have had great achievements in our relations, which has had a major, powerful impact and very positive impact on global peace and prosperity. Of course, we always have problems and issues. So I think that the best way to celebrate is to confront the challenges and build an even stronger and longer-lasting relationship.
It's agreed also by the two presidents from China and United States: cooperation, coordination, stability. But that consensus, some suggest, has not been necessarily implemented very well, at least from the Washington side. What is your take as China's ambassador to that city?
You see, the two presidents have agreed between them that we should work together to build a relationship based on coordination, cooperation, and stability. And this is the goal set by the two heads of state. Of course, we are not quite there. And you see, by definition, a goal is something you have to work towards. It's not what you already have in hand. So we'll continue our efforts to make progress toward that goal, and eventually we'll be there.
Eventually, but you know, some already argue, Mr. Ambassador, in Washington that the long-time engagement policy with China, in their words, has failed, and therefore they will look at China as a rivalry or even opponent. So in that regard, how would the hope that you have just illustrated be translated into reality? Many just wonder, how far will that be?
You see, I have learned in my years here in the United States that when you talk about America, when you talk about how American people think or feel about something, don't focus just on Washington. You have to look at the 50 states. You have to look at the American people and listen to their concern, what they believe, what they think. I think there's still very strong and widespread support among the American people for a better and more stable China-U.S. relationship. And there are different voices here.
Are we going to see more cooperation in the election year? Next year, the U.S. election year, we all know that's going to be turbulent. It's always the case for every election, and it's going to be very political. Geopolitics certainly could be one tool for politicians to play with. So, Mr. Ambassador, remain optimistic?
I think American election is domestic affairs of the United States. And foreign policy is foreign policy. Whatever happens in American domestic politics, we remain committed to building a relationship based on coordination, cooperation, and stability with the United States.
Does it mean, Mr. Ambassador, you are going to try no matter what? Does it mean China will remain optimistic and patient even during the possible turbulent times of an election year, more probably even than what we are facing today, Mr. Ambassador?
I think a better choice of words is we are confident and we are determined.
I'm noting down those two words right now, confident and determined, Mr. Ambassador. But, you know, let's just face it, it's not just about the short-term relationships. It's really about strategically where China and the United States will see each other. Now, many believe, Mr. Ambassador, the U.S. has been used to, over the past decades, about itself play a dominating role in our world today, and therefore not necessarily accept the reality that others could be able to surpass it. And now we're facing a critical juncture of that with China's economy growing and strength as well. So do you think that's possible, that the U.S. would be able to accept the fact there is a stronger China and an ever stronger China?
I think the fundamental question is how we see today's world or tomorrow's world, and how we see each other in this world, how we manage and define our relationship. I think this is a real fundamental question. And we believe today's world is certainly very different from the world in the 20th century or the 19th century. We are living in a very connected, globalized world. We are faced with so many global challenges like climate change, diseases, disasters, terrorism, and financial instability. All these challenges will require cooperation and coordination among the members of the international community, no matter they are big or small, rich or poor, strong or weak. We need the cooperation of all the members of the international community. That's why we believe our goal should be to build a community of nations for a shared future. And in this context, we also believe the bilateral relations between China and the United States should have the same goal. We should aim at mutual benefit and strengthen our cooperation. We should have mutual respect whenever we manage our differences and really build a relationship based on the long-term best interests of our two peoples. So if everybody could share our perception, our vision of the world, then the basis for cooperation is just there.
Washington has been criticizing China on the issue of Hong Kong, Tibet, Xinjiang, and probably the list goes on, accusing China of so-called violating human rights, democracy, and freedom. But exactly what's the real essence of all of these accusations, do you think, Mr. Ambassador, from inside Washington?
I think that the simple fact is that all these places you mentioned, they're part of China. They're part of Chinese territory. So they are all under the sovereignty of China. And any interference in the internal affairs of China is a provocation, is an attack on Chinese sovereignty. This is very clear. But of course, there are always people who are trying to do all these things. I think they have to keep in mind the basic norms governing international relations. They should learn how to respect other people's sovereignty and territorial integrity. It's not an issue of human rights or democracy. It's an issue of national sovereignty and independence.
If they try to do that, as they did, how will China react? And how should China react, Mr. Ambassador?
We are against that. We are firmly opposed to such attempt. We are firmly opposed to such attempt. And frankly, I think maybe there is still a small number of people whose real intention is to try to split China, to contain China, and undermine China's prosperity and territorial integrity. That's their real intention. But I don't think that they will ever succeed.
When the local elections taking place in Taiwan, and likely there's going to be more discussions, if not debates, about relations with the mainland. And certainly the U.S. Are going to play a role in these kinds of debates as tradition goes. So what does that mean to your job as the ambassador to the United States?
I think we have to make a very clear distinction. Local election in Taiwan is a local election in Taiwan province of China. As far as the United States is concerned, the U.S. has made commitments to one China policy in 3 joint communiques between China and the United States. And I just hope they will honor their commitment.
What is China's bottom line, on the other hand, Mr. Ambassador? Many would ask from different parts of the world in this regard.
This is one China principle.
What does that mean?
Well, the meaning is very clear. There is only one China in the world. Both Taiwan and the mainland of China are part of China. And
right.
China's sovereignty and territorial integrity should not be violated.
Okay. I think that message is loud and clear. Let me ask you also about trade, Mr. Ambassador. With the announcement of achievement of the first phase agreement, people are expecting, when and who are going to sign that first phase agreement? Any latest to update us, Mr. Ambassador?
I think that the 2 teams are working very closely on all the arrangements for this agreement. And I think it will be announced in good time.
I see. All right. But we have seen interesting phenomenon over the past few weeks since the announcement was made about the success of the phase 1. The U.S. side apparently has been very upbeat and also spreading the message of numbers and contents of this phase 1 agreement. Well, the Chinese side tends to be more sketchy and speaking generally. How should we read this interesting comparison, Mr. Ambassador?
Maybe people have different styles, but the fact is very clear that trade relations between the 2 countries should be for mutual benefit. And this has been the case for the last few decades. Bilateral trade has grown so significantly, and both economies have benefited from this growing trade between them. And any issues should be solved on the basis of equality and mutual respect, and should aim at more mutual benefit. And I think this is exactly what the 2 teams have been doing over the last couple of years. And we should express our appreciation to them for concluding this phase 1 deal.
Even before it was being signed, people are already concerned whether phase 1 will be thoroughly implemented given some of the earlier practices by certain parties. What do you think, Mr. Ambassador?
Well, as far as we are concerned, we always honor our commitment. We will always implement what we promise. There's no problem about that. Of course, we certainly hope that any agreement between the two sides will be implemented effectively. And if there's any differences, any problems, the two sides should work closely together to solve them.
I know you've been accompanying the Chinese delegation to the negotiations every time, and you are always sitting there in the room or outside the room trying to support the team. What was the most difficult time, the most challenging time, and certainly the happiest moment for you, Mr. Ambassador?
Well, I'm always very happy to see people coming from Beijing to Washington, D.C. Although I may not be sitting at the negotiating table most of the time, but still, I'm doing my best to support them.
I see. Let me ask you also about the next step. Phase 1, once being signed, there's likely to be naturally phase 2. However, some suggest phase 2 could be even more challenging because of the issues it's likely to deal with. Mr. Ambassador, give us some thoughts about what's likely to be happening with phase 2. How much confidence do you have and the Chinese side has?
I think we have full confidence in our negotiators. So let the two teams do their job. And still, they are under the guidance of the two presidents. And they are working in the interests of both countries. So let's wish them great success.
We see over the past few years, the unilateralism seems to be the trend Washington is following, at least for now, and withdrawing from international treaties and also not supporting the operation of existing international and multilateral mechanisms such as that of WTO. So what would that mean for China when the U.S. Multilateral approach is pretty much reduced? What does that mean bilaterally and also for you as the ambassador to the U.S.?
I think every country can make its own decisions on its foreign policy. But as far as China is concerned, we remain firmly committed to multilateral cooperation. We remain firmly committed to the Charter of the United Nations, to the international system with the UN at the center. China will continue to be a very strong supporter of the United Nations, of multilateralism.
Mr. Ambassador, there's a lot of talk about China in the world. Every day, every headline almost. However, some suggest there is a communication problem, to say the least. So what do you think? What kind of advice would you provide as a seasoned diplomat from China for China to communicate with the rest of the world and for the rest of the world, particularly some parties, to understand the realities of the real China?
I think it's always a challenge for different cultures, civilizations, different countries, nations to have sufficient communication and mutual understanding. This is always a challenge. This is never easy. But as far as China is concerned, China is just there. We are open. We welcome all friends from other parts of the world. We are ready to work with them. We seek friendship and partnership with other countries. And of course, China is changing. China is growing and developing, and China is aiming at a better future for everybody. So if people could just come to China and see for themselves what is happening in China, I don't think it's that difficult to understand today's China and the real intentions, the foreign policy of China. I don't think it's that difficult, as long as people are willing to base themselves on the facts, or to use our favorite term, to seek truth from facts.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we have to do maybe a better job. We have to do a better job in communicating with other countries, in presenting the China story to the world. We still have to do a better job. But at the same time, for others, frankly, I think they also have to have the willingness to appreciate, to understand the real China. People should get rid of their possible bias or prejudice. People should be open-minded. If they have this kind of openness, it will not be difficult for them to understand China. You see, so many Americans have visited China. Some of them are working, living, or studying in China. And they have made friends, a lot of friends with the Chinese people. And they are having a good time in China. So I don't think it's so difficult for them. But at the same time, there are always maybe a small number of people who are so misled by their own bias or prejudice. But this is their problem. As people say, you can never wake up people who pretend to sleep.
Well said. Ambassador Cui, I know you've been one of the ambassadors who've been serving very long term in Washington, given your very heavy responsibilities over the past few years. Now a new year is coming. I wonder what is your best wishes and hope that you can share with our viewers around the world?
I'm doing my small part for my country, my people, and for the relation between China and the United States. In the new year, I will certainly continue to do that and do whatever I can to contribute to a stable relationship between China and the United States. And since the new year is coming, let me wish my country, my people even greater success, and wish everybody in Beijing and elsewhere in the country the best of luck. I know we in China, we are always hard-working people. So with our joint efforts, we will make our country better. We will make our nation better. We will be able to achieve and realize the Chinese dream. So let's work together for that.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Cui Tiankai, for your best wishes. Best wishes to you back as well, Mr. Ambassador, and Happy New Year to you as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.